If you want to know what you need to play Call of Duty Black Ops 6 on your Ultrawide at incredible frame rates, well, you're in the right spot. I'm going to be testing 4 ultra-wide resolutions across 7 GPUs and at extreme, ultra, balanced, and basic presets in the game to see exactly what you need to become the headshot king. Now, here's my test system. Pause the video now to take a look. Now let's take a look at the 3440 by 1440p resolution first. Starting with the extreme preset, we see that the 4090, 7900 XTX, and XT are all getting very high refresh rates above 120 FPS, while the 4080 is seeing high refresh rates above 90 FPS. The 4070 Ti clears 60 FPS, but the 4070 falls into undesirable performance range, while the old 2080 can't quite reach 30 FPS. The two 4070s and the 2080 are seeing their VRAM completely maxed out at the extreme preset despite running on our lowest tested resolution. Turning settings down to ultra, we see minimal gains for most of the GPUs, with the 4080 scooting into very high refresh rates with the other top 3 GPUs. The 4070 Ti holds firm in smooth range, with the 4070 seeing the biggest gains of about 28%, putting it in a playable state for the campaign, but not quite what you'd want for multiplayer. And the poor 2080 still can't hit 30 FPS. Bumping the settings down to balance, we see all GPU performance leap up, with the 4090 and 7900 XTX getting super high refresh rates, above 180 FPS, while the 4080 and 7900 XT are at the top end of very high refresh rate range. The 4070 Ti sails into high refresh rates, and the 4070 is now producing smooth refresh rates that will keep you competitive, and the 2080 finally clears 30 FPS. This is the setting I would expect most people to be playing at if they want to maintain a competitive frame rate while not hitting the game with the ugly stick too hard. And lastly, we have the basic settings, which sees only a small improvement for every GPU. The 4090 comes just shy of extreme refresh rates above 240 Hz. The 4080 and 7900 XT step up to super high refresh rates with the XTX. Both the 4070s are now delivering high refresh rates, and the 2080 is now getting an FPS where you can make your way through the campaign. Now let's take a look at the 1% lows to see if all these extreme refresh rates actually mean anything. We're going to look at 2 settings. We're going to look at extreme setting because ultra offers so little extra performance, and if you're the kind of gamer to game at the top end of the settings, you're not going to be happy with some iffy middle ground. You're going to go all the way. And then we're going to look at the balance setting because also basic delivers so little extra performance, and I believe this is where most gamers are going to end up with their settings. There's going to be a few caveats at these 1% low discussions at the lower resolutions. Using the extreme setting, we see the 4090 is the only card to have high refresh rate 1% lows. The 4080, 7900 XTX, and XT all land in smooth refresh rate range. Now, here comes the caveats. The AMD cards have a higher CPU overhead than the NVIDIA ones, which is affecting the 7900 XTX's 1% low performance at this resolution. While I have a fast gaming CPU, I do not have the fastest, and it is possible that the 7900 XTX could match or even beat the 4090 at this resolution with the best of the best CPU. Thanks to great benchmarking tools in Black Ops 6, you can see here that my 5800 X3D is bottlenecking the 7900 XTX to the tune of 29%, while the 4090 sees only a couple of percent, and the 4080 and 700 XT are unencumbered. The 4070s and 2080 have their own issues with the extreme preset setting, using up every scrap of memory that 12GB cards have and way more than the 2080 has on offer, which leaves the 4070 Ti with an acceptable 1% low. But the 4070 and 2080 have terrible results that necessitate that you lower the settings for a good experience. Speaking of which, let's move on to the balanced results. With such high average frame rates, we see the top 4 GPUs with 1% lows over 120 FPS, and now all GPUs are CPU limited to one extent or another. Although you actually see the 700 XTX be less CPU bottlenecked using balance settings than extreme, as some of the heavy CPU hitting graphics features are lowered or disabled. Both the 4070 Ti and 4070 cards have 1% lows over 60 FPS, and even the old 2080 is able to keep its 1% lows over 30 FPS. Thanks to the VRAM usage dropping precipitously when going down to the balance settings, we see a staggering 11GB less VRAM usage between the extreme and balance settings. If you're looking to play the campaign at the highest settings, then you're going to need a 700 XT or a 4070 Ti Super for that extra 16GB of memory to keep your 1% lows above 60 FPS. Now, if you're just looking to have some fun on balanced in multiplayer, then the 4070 is going to get you where you need to go. And the 7900 XT is the cheapest way for your 1% lows to stay over 120 FPS. Moving up in resolution to 3840 by 1600p, we now see only the 4090 and 7900 XTX clear the 120 FPS mark at the extreme preset, with the 4080 and 7900 XT both in high refresh rate range. The 4070 Ti is delivering an average frame rate that would be playable in the campaign but would not allow you to be competitive online. And the 4070 is delivering an unsatisfactory performance, and the old 2080 is not even at 30 FPS. Using the Ultra preset, we see small gains from most cards, with the 4090 and XTX still alone in very high refresh rates. The 4080 and XT are still getting high refresh rates. The 4070 Ti now clears 60 FPS, and the 4070 is providing frame rate you could campaign in, and the 2080 is still under 30 FPS. Dropping down to the balance preset, we see the 4090 now in super high refresh rate range, just clearing the 200 FPS mark. The XTX is now joined by the 4080 and XT in very high refresh rates. The 4070 Ti is now getting high refresh rates, and the 4070 is delivering a smooth gameplay. And the little old 2080 is now over 30 FPS. Using the basic preset, all cards get minor gains, with the XTX joining the 4090 in super high refresh rates, just beyond the very high refresh rates of the 4080 and 7900 XT are getting. 4070 Ti and 4070 stay in high and smooth refresh rates respectively, and the 2080 still struggles. Now let's see how the 1% lows turned out. If you plan on playing on extreme settings, then you will need one of the top 4 GPUs to maintain a better than 60 FPS frame rate. Even at an increased resolution, the 7900 XTX still sees CPU bottlenecking on my system, bringing its 1% lows below that of the slower 7900 XT, thanks to the unstable nature of CPU capped frame rates. The 4070 Ti, 4070, and 2080 are all struggling with VRAM limited performance, with none of them delivering satisfactory 1% lows. Turning on the balance preset sees the 4090 and 7900 XT the only ones with 1% lows above 120 FPS. And for the first time in my graphs, the XTX's 1% lows outperformed that of the XT's. Thanks to the lowering of the CPU bottlenecking, the 4080 and 7900 XT are seeing high refresh rate 1% lows, with the 4070 Ti in smooth range, and the 4070 still getting acceptable 1% low performance. The old 2080 can't reach 30 FPS for its 1% low performance, however. At this resolution, if you want to play the campaign on max settings, you're going to need the 7900 XT. That'll give you high refresh rates for the average and 1% lows over 60 FPS. If you're okay with playing it on balance, then the 4070 will do it, and it'll get you where you need to go online, but you probably want to get the 7900 XT to dominate at both. Which brings us to our next resolution, the Super Ultrawide 5120 by 1440p resolution. When running the extreme presets, only the RTX 4090 is able to maintain high refresh rates, with the 4080, 7900 XTX, and XT all delivering high refresh rate experiences. The 4070 Ti can manage a playable, if not great, frame rate for doing the campaign, but the 4070 can't quite manage even that at this high of a resolution, and the 2080 is looking pretty rough. Dropping down to the Ultra preset gets each card a smidge more performance, with the 7900 XTX now joining the 4090 in very high refresh range, leaving the 4080 and XT still with high refresh rates. 4070 now joins the Ti in acceptable territory, and the 2080 is still struggling. Going down one more settings rung, we see the balance preset delivering a nice performance boost. The 4090 is now getting super high refresh rates, over 180 FPS, while the XTX is joined by the 4080 and 7900 XT in delivering very high refresh rates. The two 4070s are now delivering nice smooth refresh rates over 60 FPS, and even the 4080 has managed to cross the 30 FPS line. Lowering settings even more to the basic preset sees only marginal gains for all GPUs, and doesn't change any of their performance standings. Now, let's see how the 1% lows fared. At the extreme preset, we see our top 4 cards delivering smooth 1% lows above 60 FPS, with the 7900 XTX still suffering from CPU bottleneck issues. The 4070 Ti managed to stay above 30 FPS with its 1% lows, but the 4070 and 4080 are getting absolutely dismal results. The balance preset sees all cards step up to the next level, with the 4090 managing 1% lows with very high refresh rates, while the 4080 and the two AMD cards are all seeing high refresh rate 1% lows. Two 4070s both see acceptable 1% lows, though they may be less than what you would want to keep competitive online. The 2080 can't quite reach 30 FPS averages for its 1% lows. At the super ultra-wide resolution, the 7900 XT again proves itself to be the best value for those who want to have a great time on the campaign on extreme settings, and those who want to be competitive online using balance settings. Looking into the future of ultra-wide gaming, we have the 5120x2160p ultra-wide resolution, running Black Ops 6 on its extreme settings. Even with this heavy load, we see the RTX 4090 and 7900 XT delivering high refresh rates over 90 FPS. And for the first time, the 7900 XT outperforms the 4090. The 4080 and the 7900 XT are both delivering smooth refresh rates in excess of 60 FPS, and now the 4070 Ti's performance is completely crippled by its memory and is now matching that of the 4070 at barely over 30 FPS, and the 2080 is threatening to creep into single digits. Lowering the settings to Ultra sees no notable improvement in playability for any card. The 4090 does manage to squeak back past the 7900 XTX though, as they're still running neck and neck. And even though the 2080 does see additional 50% performance, it still doesn't get close to 30 FPS. Lowering settings again to balance sees a nice performance jump for all GPUs, with the 4090 and 7900 XTX in a dead heat in a very high refresh rate range. The 4080 and 700 XT are both now getting high refresh rates, and the two 4070s are nearly 60 FPS, and the 2080 gets close to 30. And finally, the basic setting sees marginal gains, but does push some of the GPUs over some important thresholds. The 7900 XT now joins the 4090 and 7900 XTX in the over 120 FPS club, while the 4080 stays in high refresh range. The two 4070s both squeak past 60 FPS, and even the 2080 makes it to 30 FPS. Now let's see how the 1% lows played out at the 5K 2K resolution. On Extreme preset, we see the 4090 as the only card to clear 60 FPS with its 1% lows. The 7900 XTX just misses out on that mark, landing in the acceptable performance range with the 4080 and 7900 XT, and sadly, yet expectedly, the remaining three cards are seeing terrible 1% lows. The balance setting changes the picture up significantly, and now we see both the 4090 and 700 XTX running neck and neck with 1% lows and high refresh rates. The 4080 and 700 XT are seeing some nice smooth 1% lows above the 60 FPS mark, and the two 4070s are above 30 FPS for their 1% lows, while the 2080 is languishing in sub 30 territory. Again, the 7900 XT is proving itself to be the best value for those who want to have a great experience on Extreme in the campaign, or be competitive online using balanced settings. Though, if you demand your 1% lows to stay above 60 FPS, then the 4090 is the only card that achieves that in my graphs. Though, the 7900 XTX does get close and may make it if you have an even faster CPU. So there you have it, the complete guide to ultra-wide gaming in Call of Duty Black Ops 6. You should have a really good idea of what GPU you need to get the kind of performance you're looking for in this game. But if you came up to me and said, I'm a Call of Duty player almost exclusively, what GPU should I get? I'd point you to the 7900 XT. It's going to give you an amazing experience at all resolutions, and it's not going to break the bank for the 3440 by 1440p players, and it can play up to extreme settings at our highest resolution, and it have extremely high refresh rates for online play. The only caveat I would have is make sure you have a CPU that can keep up, like a 5800 X3D or better. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to catch all my latest ultra-wide content, and you can check out one of my other videos here. If I helped you make a GPU buying decision and you're going to buy off of Amazon, please consider using my affiliate link in the description below, or you can sign up to my Patreon to help the channel out more directly. I'm Scott, and I'll see you next time.